Welcome, everybody, to On Texas Football. I'm your host, Blake Munroe, where I'm joined by CJ Vogel. And CJ, we both froze a little bit this morning out there at Texas Junior Day. It was very cold. I think we're a little bit warmer now than what we were. But before we get to Junior Day, some big portal news brewing. Can you tell everybody about that?
Yes, it is expected. On Texas Football has heard from a source out of Tucson that it is expected that Texas will host Arizona portal transfer defensive lineman Teolia Sevilla. I pray to God I got that name pronunciated correctly because I've been practicing for the last couple minutes. But Sevilla, a defensive lineman out of Arizona, entering the portal yesterday. Obviously familiar with Johnny Nansen, familiar with what he brought to the table now at Texas as a linebackers coach. He was the defensive coordinator at Arizona last year. 6 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. Production doesn't necessarily stand off the page to you, but it is a capable defensive line body that you can throw into the interior and see production next season if you were to join the Longhorns. He is expected to arrive later this evening. We expect him to go through his visit and meet with the Texas staff later tonight and into tomorrow as well. So big news out of the portal. Texas, as we've mentioned, still looking for a defensive line prospect to add to their roster for 2024. They might have their eyes set on Sevilla coming in this evening.
And that's interesting to me, CJ, because, I mean, when he first entered the portal, a lot of the chatter that you heard immediately was Arizona State. So Texas getting into the mix there and putting their hat or their name in the hat, I guess you could say.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm right there with you. That was the initial word that I had heard last night was Arizona State looked like it was going to be a team to beat for Sevilla. But we've talked about long and hard about how Texas needs to ramp up what they have on the interior defensive line. I don't believe that they'll be done if Sevilla is added to the group, but it certainly would be a step in the right direction to getting that room to where it needs to be, specifically from a depth perspective.
Oh, for sure. No doubt about that. Well, that was some unexpected portal news, but let's talk about unexpected visitors. And there was a couple on campus, out-of-state visitors at that. And we're going to start with Blaine Bradford, who a lot of services have ranked as the #1 safety and really a top 5, top 10 type player. What do you know about Bradford?
Well, I know he was a surprise to see on campus, and I'm glad Texas is continuing to recruit Louisiana very hard. That is one of the spots that our Rod Babers likes to bring up a lot. They have the most NFL talent per capita of any area in the United States, specifically at the defensive back category, in which you can go into Louisiana and start targeting one of the top defensive backs in the state. Good things often turn out that way, and we've certainly seen it this past season on the field with Derek Williams. Texas is hosting Bradford. Blake Gideon doing a great job of getting him on campus and letting him see what Texas is really all about for the first time in person. A really important addition to the visitors list as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And then Gavin Nix, the IMG Academy 2025 linebacker, we both ran into him. And one thing that really jumped out to me, and we posted a video on Twitter of that interview, but, him talking about his former teammates, Jordan Johnson-Rubel and Jarrett Gibson, who both were at IMG last season. They're already recruiting him hard for the Longhorns. Of course, he's already hearing from Miami and Florida State. An impressive prospect, no doubt. But, those Florida kids that are Texas kids now, I guess you could say, they're all over him already.
They certainly are. And I think you and I both had the same thought. We took a quick 3-minute break in the car to warm up a little bit, get the Twitter fingers back to work. But he walked by, and I think we both kind of looked up and were like, who's that? He's a physically impressive kid that, certainly looks the part of a Division I linebacker. And so obviously, we start chatting with him, and sure enough, Texas is already recruiting them pretty hard, and it's not just the coaching staff, as you mentioned. Jordan Johnson-Rubel, Jarrett Gibson. This is what I would say very important about Texas being able to infiltrate some of the big powerhouses nationally. They replenish and reload talent year in and year out. And so if you're able to walk into a Modern Day or an IMG Academy or a DeSoto and Duncanville, that trickles down and certainly helps you in years on as the cycles progress. We'll get into the DeSoto talk later on, but for IMG specifically, Texas has not had a lot of success there over the past couple of years, but getting Gavin Nix on the campus, tremendous for Johnny Nansen early on in his Texas tenure, and Texas certainly has some ties there as well to make things a little interesting. Really impressive prospect. Again, I have to reiterate that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and talking about impressive prospects, obviously we're not getting to see these kids work out, but who stood out to you from a physicality standpoint? Like impressed you right when you first laid eyes on them today? I have one in mind. I'm interested to hear who you're going to say.
I think there was two, and they're on the same team and on the same position, and that's crazy to me. Texas is having a very stacked, very impressive offensive line group on campus this weekend. Mm-hmm. Two names that I think Texas fans need to be familiar with are out of Bridgeland. Jonte Newman, who has been on campus in July and back for a game, and Ryan Foji. And I know that we haven't necessarily talked about him a whole lot. He's kind of new to the recruiting scene. This is a kid that I saw in person and instantly said, whoa, what do we have here? Very impressive. He has a great build to him. He's got athletic lower body, a lengthy upper body, exactly what you want as a true tackle prospect. Oh, and he's new to the offensive line. Like he was a sophomore on JV playing defensive line. And so he flipped over this past season, started the kick step, started pass setting. Good things are happening for him. I think he is a true tackle prospect, someone with the lengthy arms, as I mentioned earlier. The tape doesn't lie. There's a lot of potential there. Texas is tapping in early, and he's someone that I really was impressed with just in the shorts, I guess not shorts, but the jacket and pants that we saw him arrive in. I thought he looked like he could be a Division I offensive tackle. But I wanted to hear what you have because we talked about it beforehand, and I believe it's on the same side of the ball here.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And mine's probably not a surprise to anybody, but CJ, I mean, I'm 6'3", 205. So it's not like I'm small by any means, but I felt so small standing next to Byron Washington, the offensive lineman out of DeSoto. Of course, we'll talk more about his recruitment here in just a little bit, but man, he made me just feel smaller than I think I've ever felt in my life. And it was funny. I posted that video on Twitter and someone asked me, did you have to get on a ladder to interview him? Because I mean, I think he said 6'7". I can't remember what he said exactly that his weight's at right now, but 6'7". And God, to me, it felt more like 6'8", man. I'm not going to lie. I mean, he just towered over me. And it was just crazy, but just a really, really good looking kid. Of course, we've seen the viral pictures of him from the state game. Everybody pretty much has at this point. But God, you knew it was him seeing him from 100 yards away. I mean, there was no doubt like, oh, that's instantly Washington. It was crazy.
Yeah, he was, one that arrived on to the arrival, location, and immediately, like you said, everybody was like, oh yeah, like. No need to ask who that is. Like we know he is every bit of 375, 380. And to his credit, he's reshaped his body a little bit. He's slimmed down from where he was when he visited in July. And I think that's a credit to him. He's working to get his body to the Division I Power 5 level. And it's taking the steps necessary to get there. But as you said, big old boy, big son prospect.
Yes. When I said I haven't ever felt that small, I truly mean that. Well, like I said, we'll get into his recruitment here in just a little bit. But you and I, we talked to a lot of kids today, and so obviously we can't get to all of them, or this video would be 3 hours long at this point. But what are some of the who's a noteworthy guy that you want to start with to give Texas fans the latest information?
Yeah, Jabari Antoine, the top target, the cornerback out of Louisiana, was quickly in attendance at Moody for the Texas and Baylor basketball game this morning. Great to see. He's been to Texas several times now. I know there are plenty of other schools that are in the mix for him, but Texas is doing a great job of making him feel like a priority. And then the other one I wanted to mention was Elijah Bo Barnes, the linebacker out of Skyline. He's set to visit Texas A&M next weekend, but Johnny Nansen actually stopped by Skyline earlier this week to watch him work out, and he said it was really good to get to introduce himself with Nansen, start to establish that relationship. Texas has been a long-time suitor for Elijah Bo Barnes, and And obviously with the turnover at the linebacker spot, there's kind of a new chapter in which they got to build upon. So getting him to campus this weekend, as we've mentioned, the linebacker spot for the 2025 class is pretty impressive. That is an impressive list that is walking in with the addition of Gavin Nix now. Those names continue to roll on, but Barnes specifically, he got out of his car, and another guy where I was like, looks like he can start at a Division I program right away. And that's going into a senior year. So I'm excited for that.
Well, staying on the defensive side of things, a guy that I talked to is corner Cobey Sellers out of Shadow Creek. And, he's fresh off a visit from Sark. Sark stopped by a school last Friday, and it sounds like that was an extremely productive visit there. He had a lot of really good things to say about Sark in Texas, and, had high hopes for this weekend. But one thing that really stood out to me, CJ, he immediately had no problem saying, I'm high on OU, I'm high on Texas, I'm high on Georgia. He also just came off a Georgia visit last weekend, and he's visiting OU next weekend. But it sounds like he's already kind of circling things down to those three, and also looking at A&M, which he's going to visit here in the coming weeks as well.
That's really important. Texas is in the fight for a lot of in-state cornerbacks. We obviously saw them last year, last cycle, go out and grab a kid from Louisiana, IMG in the secondary, Arizona as well. So it's not like they're stuck within the state lines. But as we've talked about, establishing pipelines is important, and Texas is already snagging a commitment from Shadow Creek linebacker Anthony Williams as well. So another spot in Houston that produces a lot of talent, and Sellers is certainly in that conversation, as you mentioned, having a unofficial top three, or what we're assuming is a top three of Georgia, Oklahoma, and Texas. Just goes to show the type of talent that he brings to the table and how coveted he is.
Yeah, and one guy I was really trying to pry information out of is one of the top tight ends of the nation, Kiotti Armstrong out of Jasper. And, he said he's wide open at this point. But one interesting note, his former teammate, Ty Anthony Smith, the linebacker signee for the Longhorns, he's all over that kid, man, like telling him Texas is the place for you. All Jasper kids need to be going to Texas, nowhere else. I mean, it sounds like he may be the ace up the sleeve for the Longhorns.
Which is funny because you think about his recruitment. Texas wasn't involved very early. They lost a verbal pledge to USC. They then lost him to Texas A&M. You fight him again, and late in the cycle, and now he's working for you, basically. How that's just the new age of recruiting, and it's a testament to Texas to staying on him. And as we talked about, establishing relationships at schools that produce talent is so important. IMG, DeSoto, Duncanville, Jasper now. How about it?
Yeah, and you mentioned DeSoto, and let's talk about them. Obviously, a couple of DeSoto products there, actually more than a handful of DeSoto products. But you had what seemed to be a pretty good conversation with Boobie Miles, the 2027 kid, and I talked to his father while you were talking to Miles himself. What was your takeaways from that conversation?
Yeah, Ethan Boobie Feaster, the 27.
I'm sorry, Miles. I'm over on Friday Night Lights. Feaster.
No, but I was right there with you. Feaster is going to be one of the top prospects in the 2027 class. We haven't talked about 27s too often for a reason. There's a long time before we have to really start focusing in on their true recruitments. But this is a kid that's been to Texas now. He said 5 times. And he's a kid that is expecting to hit 10.5 in the 100-meter as a freshman in high school this spring. You don't see that very often. No. He's probably about 6'1". Really exciting kid. I actually saw his high school debut this season against Allen at Allen, in which he had a handful of catches for about 50 yards. First start at Allen. How about that? So really impressive kid. He talked about his relationship with Jonte and Trey Wisner. Jonte actually texted him last night to ensure that he was making the trip up to Austin and getting campus. It sounded like he was excited to see him in person once again. He talked about Byron Washington, Sael Reyes, the defensive back in the 25 class out of DeSoto as well as Tiger Ryden, who we've talked about a few times, all of which are expected on campus today. But Feaster talked about his excitement for Texas in terms of, just in general, the trajectory that they're heading on. And he's one that you talked about receivers making big plays. For guys at that speed that we've talked about Texas adding out of the portal in that 10-5, 10-6, 10-7 range, he fits the mold. And we got 3 more years to watch him develop and see what kind of prospect he grows into. Very bright future.
Yeah, and one thing that I really enjoyed talking to his dad about was how well that he excelled in other sports. His dad was like, man, he'd make a phenomenal baseball player, but he's not patient enough. He wants the action. He wants the ball in his hands, making plays. And even basketball, you know, he said that he's a great basketball player, but that his love for football is just unmatched. And if you're Sark, you got to love hearing that.
Oh, without a doubt. This is a kid that, from a blueprint perspective, fits what Sarkisian wants to do on the offensive side of the ball to a T. And I think that's incredibly important. As you said, focusing on football is only going to help further his development at DeSoto.
Yeah, and Sark's been on record too saying he loves multi-sport kids. And so, I mean, obviously he's playing these other sports. It's just football is his true love. And then, you know, earlier we mentioned Byron Washington. One thing that immediately jumped out to me, I said, Byron, are there any other schools that are really high on your list that you're really interested in besides Texas? One word answer, nope. So I think that says it all right there. Like, there's nothing left to discuss after that. That was the quote of the day, in my opinion.
He is the purest depiction of the hashtag big human movement that we are seeing at Texas. 6'7", 380. That's him.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, is there anybody else that Texas fans need to be aware of going through the rest of today's junior day?
Not necessarily from a recruit perspective, but from a team perspective, I did just get a note. Texas Portal Wide Receiver Edition, Isaiah Bond, is on campus. He is at Moncrief. He is helping with the junior day. He is the word that I got is he is being very sociable with recruits, taking photos, snapping pictures. You know, one of those big additions from the portal, one of those splash guys that Texas added this offseason, made a lot of headlines, obviously has a good reputation for being Alabama's leading wide receiver this past season. He's doing, you know, unofficial meet and greet and helping with the Texas Junior Day to recruit for the Longhorns. And if that, as we mentioned, the quick turnaround for Texas in this cycle to getting guys on campus and getting that snowball rolling, this is another example of why it's so important. And so credit to the Texas staff and also to Isaiah Bond for being a really important piece for this junior day. We had talked about who might be the guys to take over the player perspective from a panel side or anything like that. Isaiah Bond walking in and explaining to recruits why he left Alabama to come to Texas is going to make an impact.
Oh, without a doubt. And how awesome is that for a guy that's been on campus a couple of days now to, you know, take that step and to just go out there and start recruiting for the school that he just committed to. You know, I mean, I really, like you said, I think that speaks volumes, man. There's no doubt.
Certainly. It certainly is impressive.
Yeah, for sure. Well, CJ, some other big news that we got to talk about that's not really recruiting junior day portal related is the launch of ontexasfootball.com. Obviously, by now you're well aware of our videos, but now we have that first web presence, message board, everything. So you got to go check it out on ontexasfootball.com. And I know you're just excited about it as I am, CJ.
Yeah, this is going to be really exciting. I'm excited to build the community, engage with some new friends, reconnect with some old ones. But this will be a really exciting time.
For sure. No, for sure. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this video. We appreciate you tuning in. Like we said, head on over to ontexasfootball.com. By the way, you got to subscribe if you haven't already and ring that bell because there's just so much breaking news going on right now. It's unbelievable. And that way you don't miss a single bit of it. You'll get notified anytime and every time we go live or post a video just like this one. So for CJ Vogel, I'm Blake Munroe, and we'll see you next time.